Good morning, everyone. I'm making a video for one of my students, Sherrine, who asked me a very interesting question. Being retired military myself, she asked me how I felt about President Trump using the military to quell the violence and unrest that we currently have engulfing the United States. Well, he does have the right, according to the Insurrection Act of 1807, to bring in the military to quell insurrection or violence and to stop looting and wanton destruction of property. Back in 2007, shortly after the events of 9/11, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2007 did allow for any emergency and hindering the enforcement of laws, regardless of state consent, to be cause for use of the military. Now, basically, what that said was the president can mobilize troops, active duty, or even call up National Guard troops from whatever state and override the governor's request and send in troops to quell violence. In 2008, that was repealed. Well, not so much repealed. It was amended. And so they had some changes because all 50 governors said, no, I don't think so. You're not going to just use military troops in my state where I can possibly quell the violence on our own using our own law enforcement or our own state police or even the National Guard. So, one, the president can do this. How do I feel about it? Well, mixed feelings because me being prior military, I don't think that active duty troops are really trained to quell insurgencies. And this is not an insurgency or an insurrection. They're not usually there to stop violence, stop looting. Members of the military are trained to win the nation's war. And currently, we're not at war with each other, although it may seem like it. You don't want to have infantry troops or combat arms troops walking the streets of any major city. I think that's going to further exacerbate and inflame the situation. Bringing troops in is not the way ahead. How do you stop the rioting and the looting? And a lot of people are saying, well, the police should be doing this. Yes, the police should be doing some things, but the Supreme Court has ruled that the police are not there to protect property and individuals. So you as an individual do not have a right to police protection. No, believe it or not, the Supreme Court has already ruled that. The police do not have to protect your property either, to include your personal house or your business. So the police don't have to do it, and as a result, there's not enough police officers to protect everyone. And I understand why a police chief or a mayor would not send their police officers to do that. Do you send the military to do that? You have to have clear rules of engagement, and that's one thing that police officers don't have when it comes to the military. It's similar to have called use of force, but rules of engagement apply when you are dealing with the enemies of the state, usually in another country. So it's not going to be so easily defined. I'm pretty sure that there's lots of lawyers right now trying to figure out a way so that the president can use military force if necessary. But what are the left and right limits? What are the boundaries? I personally think that if you're going to use the military, there have to be some clear guidelines set and enforced. Now, it's a lot easier to enforce law in the military because of the Uniform Code of Military Justice than in the civilian world. The UCMJ is very unforgiving and it's very exacting. It doesn't miss anything. The other issue is, how do you enforce a military law on the public? I mean, are you going to declare martial law and then the military's rules now supersede the city and state ordinances? There's a lot of things that have to come into play when that happens. And I personally don't think that's the way ahead. It's well within his right to do so, his decision to do so. I think the president is threatening to use that to try to get people to calm down, but that's not the way ahead. You've also further alienated your governors well, I'm going to do what I think is right, regardless if you don't want to do what's right. Okay, that's all a perception. So I don't think the best way ahead is the use of military troops at all. It's going to further inflame what we already have. The rhetoric that's being used, the possibility of using that, the threats of that. There's a lot of people who don't understand how the military works, which is most of the country. And that's probably not a good idea to put our troops in harm's way to potentially engage and fire upon American citizens. We don't even want to go down that road to see what would happen if U.S. troops are starting to fire on American citizens. So I don't think that's the way ahead. We need to come up with another alternative as opposed to just send the military in and they'll do whatever needs to be done. The military will do what needs to be done. They'll do what they're ordered to do, provided the orders are lawful. But having troops on every corner is not what we want. We do not want a police state. And we know that having troops around in other countries hasn't always worked out as well either. So imagine trying to do that in America, a country totally founded on rebellion, where, you figure 330 million people in the country. How many guns do we have here versus other countries? And how many people are willing to use them for their own rights, for which they feel are violated? So there you have my take on it. I don't think that's the way ahead. We need to come up with another solution and use our heads. We accomplish more through reason than by force.